Hey folks, I am doing this update on the eclipse, the solar eclipse in June, on June 20th of this year. I have the chart here. As you can see, this very close eclipse is happening. The sun and moon will come together at about 6 degrees of Gemini. Of course, that's the sidereal zodiac, the zodiac we use in Vedic astrology and Indian astrology. It's in every Vedic astrology text. Aries and Ashwini begin the zodiac circle, the Sayana and Nirayana zodiacs, or I should say the zodiac itself. That's called the Nirayana zodiac, which is the zodiac without the solstice added. And so they both line up at 0 Aries, Ashwini Nakshatra, and 0 Aries. So this is how we reckon the chart in Vedic astrology. And so you see they're very close also to the eclipse point, or I'm sorry, to the node. What happens is when the sun joins the node, that month we have our eclipses, because the nodal axis is literally where the orbits of the sun, moon, and earth intersect. That's what the lunar nodes are. You know, it's often said that there are these invisible forces. Well, they're not invisible. They're mostly invisible. They're invisible like 365 days of the year, or no, 362 days of the year, let's say. And then for a couple days of the year, they're visible. You would say in aggregate, or for a few hours each year. Then we see them. But those points are always there. The eclipse points are always there. And this really shows the sort of hidden, subconscious, unconscious, qualities of our life and mind. That's what the lunar nodes show. And when we have eclipses, it pops out. So individually and collectively, our subconscious, unconscious, sort of buried nature is going to pop out. This is why when we have eclipses, when we get in the eclipse cycle, we have a lot of subconscious, unconscious things that pop out on the collective level. And of course, as I record this now, I'm recording this on June the 7th. We can see, even if we go back on, for example, on June the 5th, which was a couple days ago, we had this lunar eclipse in Scorpio, which was the halfway point in that Taurus cycle where we're trying to stabilize and feel stable, solid, and settled in our life. Opposite of that stable, solid, and settled nature, which shows the sun in Taurus, is Scorpio. So we had that full moon in Scorpio, which shakes things up, brings upheaval, so that we can feel cherished and, really connected to our values, both individually and culturally. That's a lot of what this cycle is right now that we're in, because the sun is in Taurus. So the sun is always the leading edge of all of the cycles that we're going through each year. And you see, when we had the lunar eclipse on June the 5th, you see that the sun was close to the node. It was about, it's about 13, 14 degrees from the lunar node. So basically the nodal axis is here and the sun was about here. By the time we have the solar eclipse, though, the sun is going to get right on top of the node. So you see, as I go forward, I'll go forward each day. You see how the sun is getting closer to this exact degree of Rahu, which is 5 degrees. I keep going, sun's getting closer, closer. And you see that it happens when the sun is at like 6 degrees, Rahu is about 5 degrees, and the moon, of course, is also there. So this eclipse is right on the node. So it's a very strong eclipse, this solar eclipse. Again, you always want to understand that the cycles we're having and the most salient parts of any interpretation, literally, whether it's new moons or full moons, that includes solar eclipses or lunar eclipses, we have to keep in mind, we have to remember that it's the sun which is leading it, because the sun is what's creating all of this, particularly eclipses and lunation cycles. Now, they're called lunation, which means lunar cycles, but the lunar cycles are based on the sun as well, because it's the moon in relationship to the sun. So everything follows the sun. The sun is the soul of all. So I say this because we're moving now from this Taurus lesson. I'll just back this up. We're moving from this Taurus lesson of stability, structure, values, feeling valued, feeling appreciated, because Taurus is ruled by Venus. We're moving from that lesson. And again, this also implicates things like our childhood, the values we were raised in. These are all Taurus lessons, the values in the world we want to take forth, the values we want to share collectively. And again, with all of these upheavals that we're seeing in the world now, with the Black Lives Matter and the things that have happened in the US with Mr. Floyd being choked and suffocated, that has spurned like an international sensitivity to racial awareness. Seeing this right around the eclipse in Scorpio, but happening during the Taurus cycle, that's how we can look at the lesson. It's not just a bunch of Scorpio triggering drama, suspicion. Some of that's there, of course, that's a backdrop because that's opposite of Taurus. But the motivation is peace and stability. This is why the protests have now turned very peaceful. As we got closer to the eclipse, the protest became much more peaceful. And by the way, I said this last week. Go back and look at the video I did last week on the Scorpio eclipse, and that's what I said, that we're going to see some upheavals, and then as we get closer to the eclipse, it's going to chill out, and that's what happened. But it's because of we're trying to stabilize the Taurus end of life, which is I want peace, stability, and it's moving into Gemini. How Taurus moves into Gemini is this quality of, let's say, for example, if you use the example of like a human life, Taurus, again, is like the childhood, being nurtured, being fed, being valued like a child is being valued. You know, the baby is born in Aries, then the baby is fed and raised and nurtured in an environment in Taurus. And then based on that environment and whatnot, we start to develop interest and we start to question and we start to want to understand things on our own terms, which is the qualities of Gemini. So right now we're in the Taurus phase moving into Gemini. That's where we are right now. How do we take this thing that now feels pretty good after all of the upheavals? We're also looking at the ugly side has been revealed, especially about policing, about race. Even if you're so inclined, like many of us are at this point, the government's response, in particular the president's response as well, it was so gross that even generals and en masse people who have been very hesitant to criticize him, before you get mad at me for saying it, if you're a Trump supporter, just look around. All the generals, all of these people that have come out and said, look, this is too far. You can't threaten to put troops in the streets because of lawful protest. Yes, there was there was looting and all of this, but it's just too much an overreaction. You can't use this as an excuse for overreaction. And so, again, this was that Scorpio underbelly, that darkness being revealed. The Scorpio being opposite the Taurus is like ripping the scab off of all of our dark and buried domination structures. And the reason is because we're having this Taurus experience with the sun having gone through Taurus, joined retrograde Venus, all kinds of stuff. But that's where we're coming from. So after ripping the scab off and seeing this stuff, we naturally have now congregated around a unifying message, let's say, going forward. Something that's where we have a collective stake in everything. That's where we're at right now, right? Again, I'll just march this back a couple weeks. This is where we are right now. Actually the moon is in Purvashada, but it's in Sagittarius now. And so the solar eclipse in Gemini, I'll say hi to a few people here. I see Leah is here. She says hi from Houston. Hello. Hi, Mr. Jeppy and everyone. Hello, Zully. Subriana, hi. Hello from Florida, Terry. Also see the balance of masculine and feminine. Extremes of each side lead to things, racism, blaming races. Exactly, excessive force. This is what this lunar eclipse in Scorpio brought out. But again, you want to see it and read it through where the sun is primarily. It's the Taurus cycle. Taurus is about stability, respect, values, and Scorpio kind of ripped the Band-Aid off of those things that maybe we weren't noticing, we weren't seeing, to show us. My friend Naomi Bennett says, hello, Sam. Hi, Naomi. Nice to see you. Aloha. On Trump's K2 moon. Yep. And we have talked about Rahu Ketu axis showing the ugly truth of the world. Yep. Darcy, how's it going? I've noticed the full moon Scorpio in the context of the Taurus cycle. That's right. That's what I've been talking about. That's the way I interpret it. So I have I have videos on this recently where I talked about the Scorpio full moon and seeing it in this context. Obviously, before, it was right when the protests were starting, and I was like, oh boy, this is going to get bad. And then a few days before, it'll probably chill out as we get closer to that Scorpio full moon. It'll start to chill out some. Watching from Brazil, that's great. And from Queensland, Australia. All right, great. So again, now we have this, let me make this chart bigger. So it's Taurus moving into Gemini now. So by the time we hit this in Gemini in a couple weeks on the 20th, on June 20th, again, it's right as it's on the day of the solstice, or right on the solstice, pretty much. We're now going to be starting a new cycle in Gemini. So it's the new cycle. That's what the eclipses are. They're always the new moon or the full moon. Solar eclipse is on the new cycle, and the lunar eclipse is at the halfway point. So we'll be starting this new Gemini cycle. Between now and then, we're going to be waning this Scorpio. So we're going to start to feel this Scorpio energy start to, taking the lessons of this transformation and this dark sort of chapter in American history, and seeing this scab being ripped off and torn off. We're going to now start to try to let go of some of this anger, frustration, hostility toward a more stable world. For the next couple weeks, you're going to see the spirit of cooperation. I think we'll even be surprised by what Trump does. Wouldn't be surprised if we're surprised by him getting a certain amount of the message. I'm not going to ascribe any motives to why he would do it. Usually what he does is based on self-interest more than anything. It's politically not working out for him too well here, I would think, even, but I think we would even see a lot of, attempts at accommodation there. And of course, I'm not going to get into so much of the politics, but you always have to question motives, but we'll still see that. Then when we get to this full moon, this new moon here in Gemini, we're going to, again, see this I would say eruption, but it's going to be a more of an insistence, and perhaps even things like new legislation and action on a cultural level, and more of a demand to have, some kind of more tangible kind of communication, or some kind of, well, what's the message going forward? What are we going to do about this? And, we might even see more people taking to the streets. I don't know if it's taking to the streets so much, but we may see a resurgence of the message saying, okay, well, we've been doing this protesting, but we're not just doing it for our health. We want to see some police reform or some this or that. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a resurgence of the message being brought out socially like this, relative to the social things that we're seeing now. What Rahu in Gemini has shown more than anything, and I said it when it first started, was when Rahu went into Gemini, and at the end of March of 2019, it was going to basically show us the truth, a lot of ugly truths about all of us, about politics, about what we believe. Because Ketu going through the 7th house, Ketu going through Sagittarius, the 7th house from it, Ketu going through Sagittarius is saying all the things that you believe are crap. Your beliefs, those things that you believe, especially your leaders, those things that you think are giving you your life meaning and purpose. It could be on a spiritual level. If you're a spiritual person, you're going to question those things. But collectively, in this world that we all share, we have a collective kind of beliefs called our laws, and where our country is going and our world is going and all of that. Ketu going through Sagittarius since March of last year, the end of March especially, has been saying, this is a mess, what's been going on. And we're all going to be questioning what to do about it, because we're going to see all of these systems failing, all of our beliefs failing. Rahu going through Gemini is going to just explode all of the ideas that we have about how to fix it. Well, what do we do about it? Gemini, as ruled by Mercury, is very much about the ideas. Mercury is about actually figuring things out, figuring out what to do. That's Mercury. Setting up a plan, setting up a structure. That's very much Mercury. And Rahu going through Gemini since the end of March of last year has been just kind of scrambling the chessboard. Again, I'll go back. People that watch my updates know that I say these things a lot. I'm just going to repeat a little bit. But Rahu going into Gemini of 2019 coincided literally to the day, pretty much, of when the Mueller report was finally released. It was to the day, pretty much, that Rahu went into Gemini. We were going to get this disclosure. And by the way, of course, I said that was what was going to happen. I didn't know it was going to be to the day, but astrology always still shocks me. But again, look at how far we've gone since then. Remember March of 2019 when the biggest thing was the Mueller report, and what we thought about it, what you might have thought about it then, what you were thinking it was going to mean, and how all of that seems like, oh yeah, all that. Everybody's ideas of what is going to fix the broken systems, the broken philosophies or whatever, has now been scrambled so many times we don't even recognize anymore what the heck we think is so important. It's very different now that it's all been shifted. Again, since then we've been through like an impeachment. All of this is also this Rahu going through Gemini and looking at the truth of the systems. It doesn't mean that justice will prevail. Again, justice is Sagittarius. Truth is Gemini. And truth and justice don't follow. They're not necessarily the same thing. In fact, they rarely are. Nobody feels like they have any justice now. No one has justice. Ketu and Sagittarius is saying, forget justice. You ain't getting any justice. It doesn't exist. Even if you get it, it doesn't matter, because it's not even enjoyable to get justice now, because almost half the people say, well, it was fake anyway. It was rigged anyway. Nothing feels just. Nothing feels real, and we don't know what to think about any of the solutions anymore. Conspiracy theories are just as valid as what we might see in front of our face right now. It's just, or we're afraid to even speak what might be the truth, because we know there's going to be an equally strong backlash from answers that are things like conspiracy theories. And again, you have to understand this whole thing about speech, speaking up, explaining things, telling the truth, what seems to be the obvious truth, or at least the truth to you, which would be the Gemini principle, has now been so blown and confabulated that people don't even want to speak the truth so much anymore. So again, this eclipse in Gemini is going to bring again, like a boiling over of these kind of issues, where people are going to say, And I think there's going to be a very strong response to people wanting truth, needing to speak the truth more forcefully, rather than just, okay, we've done our protests and our march. Now we want to see some changes. And that could be things even like, reallocating funds for the police. There's a whole thing about defund the police. It was actually on the front page of CNN's website. It's actually a serious conversation now. Again, I'm not saying I advocate or believe any of it. I'm just saying, look at how the conversation has shifted. Again, there's also politics. We also are dealing with this coronavirus, COVID. What happened to that? Now, all of a sudden, we're 2 weeks ago, everything was COVID, social distance. When are we going to get back? Blah, blah. That just kind of flew out the window because we saw somebody, suffocated in front of us. Next day, there's thousands of people here, not honoring social distance, and we're not even really talking about that. What I would say is that there's a couple things I would say about this part of it. I have a feeling, it's not just a hunch, but it could be a blessing in disguise, at least. And I hate to say a blessing. There's a lot of blessings about the times now, especially that we're actually seeing things that are wrong that need to be fixed. And people are actually coming to grips with the abuses that have been happening. That's very positive. But we also have been paralyzed as a nation and kind of as a world over what to do with COVID. And a lot of that has just been thrown out the window, and we're going to see the result of what happens. There's been quite a few astrologers I've seen that predict with this new moon in Gemini that we're going to get a really vicious backlash, that we're going to see cases explode again and go crazy. They actually should, if what we feared about COVID was actually true. If what we feared about COVID was actually true, then all of this non-social distancing we've been doing for about a week now would just completely destroy our systems in ways, it's completely against what we've been told. But I have a feeling that's not going to happen, and that's going to be a good thing for us to see as well. And again, it's not because we made a mistake. We needed to socially distance ourselves because this thing was extremely contagious, asymptomatic spread, and at least 2 to 3 times more deadly than the seasonal flu, and we just didn't know. It was novel. We have no idea, but we have data now, and the data has returned. And based on the data, we can see that by far the demographic risk with COVID is by far people who are older, so especially as you get older, 75, 85%. But even then, most people who are going to come in contact with it are not going to die from it. But again, we have to maintain the protocols, I think, and wear the masks and all of that. But again, we could get smacked with a wave now of COVID like we definitely don't want. And I think there's going to be a blessing in disguise here in that we're going to see that and we're going to benefit. Because again, something's going to happen with this. In a couple weeks from now, we're going to start seeing numbers that are going to be reflective of all of this protesting and all of this, the hell with COVID right now, we need to protest. And again, I'm not saying I think it's going to be great news like, oh, nothing will happen. But my feeling is that it's going to be beneficial. At the very least, we're going to get good data and see what happens if we all get back out in the streets again. What happens if we ease the social distancing? Well, we're going to find out. Again, my feeling is based on the numbers and also based on some of these qualities here of the astrology, which I'll talk about in a minute. It's going to be better news than we think. Now, it's in Mrigashira Nakshatra. There are a few questions here going up, and I'm just going to keep going here because, I am going to talk about the Mrigashira Nakshatra, of course. Mrigashira is literally the nakshatra between Taurus and Gemini, and it's equidistant between the two signs. It's 640, the last 640 of Taurus, the first 640 of Gemini. And again, this is the pure wisdom of the sidereal zodiac. This is nailed into the zodiac structure. And again, Mrigashira, which is the deer, is a perfect symbol for bridging this Taurus energy with this Gemini energy. Again, Taurus is a cow, it's a bull, four-legged creature, quadruped, and Gemini are two people, a man holding a club and a woman playing a musical instrument, but it's very fast, nimble energy. So you wind up with a deer, which is still a quadruped animal, gentle and beautiful like a cow, but it's also fast and curious and exploring its world like a Gemini. So this is this is really just an aside, part of the wisdom and the magic of the sidereal zodiac. And again, there is no debate about this by anyone who has really researched all the text and even pondered these things, that this is how the zodiac is laid out. So this Mrigashira Nakshatra, it's really great to understand. It literally means the deer head, and the deity is Soma, which is, of course, the god of the immortal nectar. And the deer as a symbol shows this searching, this wandering. It's often called the wandering star, Mrigashira, because it's where we're searching for the Soma. Like you can imagine a deer sort of curious and a little kind of restless, a little bit skittish, searching for that idyllic beauty. It's very much a nakshatra of beauty. It's one of the most gentle nakshatras, mridu, soft nakshatra. And again, we had the shift from Rahu moving from Ardra, which is when a lot of the COVID stuff was happening. The severity, the severe COVID intensity was happening when we had Rahu in Ardra Nakshatra, which is ruled by Shiva, very fierce, quite deadly. And we also had Saturn, Mars, Jupiter in Capricorn. This was the real transit where we were dealing with COVID more than anything else. This was the predominant energy. And again, you can go back. I predicted these things at the time. As soon as Mars went into Capricorn and joined Saturn, I was like, okay, here it is. We're going to be dealing with this between now and at least early May, probably the middle of May, because that was the period of time. And of course, that's the way it worked out. Astrology works, And so that cycle of all of the severe, now we're just trying to survive this thing, which was all that Capricorn energy, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, and Capricorn. We're trying to survive this thing. That energy has passed. And again, the other transit that's so important is Venus is still in Taurus. There's a lot of healing. There's a lot of grace. This healing grace, this benefit, this good news is also part of why I think it's not going to be as bad as we think. And we have to also get out of the mentality that we were in when the COVID came, because when it came at a time when we were, again, Christ, is this going to kill everybody? Because it was all this intense Capricorn energy and the debilitated planets and all like that. Venus wasn't there. We didn't have where we are now. And, of course, now Mars will also be in Pisces. Venus is still in Taurus, bringing healing. So again, now that Rahu is in Mrigashira, look at how much more gentle things are, at least in the sense of, again, even with the COVID, things have been opening more. And again, the death rates and whatnot, we're just not bombarded with the stress and fear of trying to survive this thing in that sense. But I think that what the real benefit is also on a spiritual cosmic level is incredibly powerful for spiritual awareness, because it's the soma, it's the bliss of the soul. It's the deer. The deer is just this gentle creature. There's a part of you, the part of you that has not given up yet. You haven't given up. Congratulations. And I don't mean to be coy, but you haven't given up, that you're going to find the answer, that you'll find the soma. If you just keep looking, if you just keep exploring, yeah, the world sucks. It's dark. There's horrible politicians and horrible people and cops and all this stuff that's horrible. Yeah. Right. That's life. And in spite of all that, there's breath, and there's the moment, and there's beauty, and there's consciousness, and there's God, and there's joy. None of that's gone. It's not gone. It's still there. And in fact, more than ever, it can be there. And Mrigashira is literally like that energy. It's a very innocent kind of search, this innocent search for the soma. And it requires an innocent search. Again, think of a deer. It's hardly a more innocent kind of animal, really. You know, deers are also a buck with big horns, so it's also a fierce animal. It's not just a baby fawn, you know. It's also a fierce energy, you know, the courage to explore. But it's really more of that soma in the mind. And this is a very cosmic section of the zodiac because it's right near the galactic plane. It's right near the plane of the galaxy. And you should understand that the nodes are now right on the plane of the galaxy, about a degree away. The plane of the galaxy runs like 640 Gemini Sagittarius. So as soon as Rahu went into Mrigashira, it crossed over the plane of the galaxy. And so this eclipse is happening right on the galactic plane. And of course, one of the things that's happening now is that the sun crosses over the galactic plane on the summer solstice now. By the way, this is one of the things that brought in the Mayan calendar of 2012. I don't want to get into all that, but this has been coincident now for, 50 to 70 years where we've been having the solstice occur as the sun crosses the galactic plane. And so again, this is one of the most transformative sections of the sidereal sky, if not the most. The plane of the galaxy, we're sitting in the galaxy and we see the plane of the galaxy rise up in the sign of Sagittarius, while opposite that is the sign of Gemini. So we've all seen that picture of the galactic plane rising up, especially if you've ever been to Mesoamerica and where the Mayans were and whatnot. You see it rise up. When you're seeing that, you're looking back into Sagittarius. That's back here. Well, when we see the sun on that solar eclipse day, June 20th, we're going to be looking away from the plane of the galaxy, looking out into space, beyond just the Earth. This is where Mrigashira and Ardra coincide. And Mrigashira, again, it's related to the Soma, which is also the goddess, the divine mother energy. This is literally the domain of Shiva and Shakti. Shiva is Rudra, the deity of Ardra, and Shakti, or Devi, is Soma. This is where Soma and Agni coincide and coexist at the Mrigashira-Ardra junction. And opposite that is the middle of Mula Nakshatra. Mula is literally ruled by Kali energy. This is the most cosmic, transformative section of the sky by far. So having an eclipse right on the galactic plane within a few hours of the moon crossing over into Ardra, which is where where it happens, is incredibly transformative on a spiritual level. It will be one of the most potent portals for your meditation and for your consciousness beyond all the things of the earth. But of course, we're going to see these huge transformational shifts happening around that as well. And again, I happen to think it's going to be surprisingly positive and shifting paradigm in ways that will be good. And again, nothing is all good in this world now because everything is so polarized. But I think ultimately this is going to be, at least relative to what we're seeing now culturally and whatnot, positive. Now, there's always difficulty and potential danger, especially with this plane of the galaxy and whatnot. And, all of the other types of intensities are there and could be, ripe with difficulty, especially things like, I worry more than anything, and I have been, about natural disasters, because again, we're getting close, especially this lunation is happening with Saturn and Jupiter right opposite. And again, when you get these retrograde planets, which means they're very close to the Earth and they're near the lunation, when Sun and Moon line up in the same place or are opposite, there's a higher and heightened potential for, especially like volcanoes and earthquakes and all the stuff that gets the Earth's mantle and crust moving in ways that lead to intensity. The other thing I'll say is things like hurricanes and watery problems happen a lot at this juncture. This was, for example, many natural disasters and man-made disasters or terrorist activities happened with the moon moving from Mrigashira into Ardra. Both all three, like Hurricane Katrina, 9/11, the Sumatra earthquake in 2004, all of them happened. Now, they didn't happen on new moons or on eclipses, but they happened when the moon was moving from Mrigashira into Ardra. And it can show things with water, especially, again, like Katrina or tidal wave. I worry about those things, in particular with these planets also in Earth signs. There could definitely be some scary seismic activity happening. And we've seen quite a bit of seismic activity, which I said was going to happen. It hasn't been in populated areas so much. Let's hope it doesn't happen. But it wouldn't surprise me that we could see some unfortunate seismic activity then. But again, this quality of Mrigashira and the deer exploring and wandering and caring and nurturing and taking these lessons of this Taurus cycle, which are showing themselves and revealing themselves so clearly. This is so much about caring for each other, loving each other, respecting each other. As much as it started with the fury about the police, and we're seeing now the underbelly revealed about how police are just beating people up, we need to get our handle on this, man. We just can't have this unchecked group of people that can just beat the hell out of everybody whenever they feel like it. I mean, all these cameras, one of the things that really showed me as well, or that was revealed, is that seeing the truth. This is all part of seeing the truth, not just speaking it and saying it, but even all the stuff that we say. How is all the stuff that we say, our conspiracies and all that, how are those things holding up now? We have all these ideas about what things really are, what things are really happening. Look, we're seeing what's really happening here now. We're seeing something that we can't, it's hard to just explain it away. People are still doing it, but it's harder and harder. And underneath it all, those explanations kind of go away. And that's a reality also. So I knew when I said it last year that Rahu going through Gemini was going to show us the truth. People were like, oh, great, finally Trump's going to go to jail, or finally this is going to happen, or finally the deep state will. I didn't say any of that. I didn't say any justice was going to happen. Whatever you might think justice is. Justice and truth are not the same thing. In fact, I would bet most people's idea of what they even thought the truth was last year has shifted about 15 times. What's more true and what's more real are these kinds of things. As far as shifting consciousness for all of us individually and also collectively. And we're seeing that now. This is changing things. Again, even people who maybe were sympathetic to the idea that, well, this sort of politician or this sort of political party can't be that bad. It's not really that bad. We're seeing things now that are just hard to look away from. So this is in the spirit of preservation and of caring for each other because it's Taurus. And we have this Venus retrograde, which is going to continue. But now we're going to be moving more into a realm of, okay, now let's do something collectively about it. Gemini is very much about, okay, solutions, ideas, laws, or at least, proposing laws, proposing a strategy about what to do. So now we also, again, we still have Venus retrograde here in Taurus that's really holding a lot of things together. Saturn is also retrograde in Capricorn in his own sign. I don't know if you remember, but years ago, a few months ago, when all the COVID stuff started and whatnot, I said we're going to survive this thing, but we have great transits coming up. We have some great stuff coming up that eventually it's going to lead to a lot of progress. We're in a tough spot right now, and it doesn't feel so good. But by the time we get into the spring and the summer, there's going to be some amazing breakthroughs. And this is why. This Venus and Taurus still reversing things. It's not just like, oh, this is fun. No, it's reversing. This is what retrograde is. It's reversing the sort of level of respect we might have with each other culturally and also personally. How have your personal lives retrograded? And you've reversed some things, and you've reflected on how you honor other people. You've reflected on the way you treat others. It's often about how we want to be treated, and we notice when that's not happening and we're not happy about it. But how much have you been reflecting on the way you actually treat others, and how much that has to do with the way you're treated? This is what retrograde planets do, and they disrupt the paradigm. So even though we're seeing it culturally and socially, it's also happening personally, where we see our level of respect that we feel like we need to have, that we're going to insist on. And others also reflect back how much they insist we honor them too. It's two ways, right? Saturn, of course, retrograde is the things that we're committed to, really concentrating our energy. Like, what are we really committed to? And we're reflecting on that. We're not sure. Is this really what I should be committed to? This way of seeing things or doing things? Jupiter's retrograde, and Jupiter's about to go back into Sagittarius. He'll be there at the end of June, June 29th. Jupiter will go back into Sagittarius. And from there, I think we'll start to really see a greater sense of justice, collective justice come through. Bipartisan, like if you're looking at politics and things like that. I think June and into July, we could see some real, maybe even before, but we could see some real progress made, especially some social progress in these issues. It's going to be contentious because you're going to have, politics is what it is. It's messy and it's going to be fighting and all that stuff too. But ultimately, there's big shifts happening. Last thing I'll say is Mercury is also retrograde here. I'll talk about Mercury and Mars, but Mercury is also retrograde here. But again, Mercury is really powerful now. Mercury's in Gemini. He's in his own sign. So it's nice to have Mercury here. Mercury's been in Gemini. He went into Gemini at the end of, actually, like the last week of May. He went into Gemini, but then he turns retrograde. Or he turned when did he turn retrograde? I don't know. Oh yeah, so he had just turned retrograde. Okay. So he's in Mrigashira Nakshatra, which is very much about being inspired and the quality of knowledge and information to inspire us and to be a creative force. And so Mercury in Gemini is bringing enormous skill and enormous focus, or at least skill and organization, especially in our mind and in our rhetoric, and really seeing things clearly. You see, he's there now. One of the big reasons why also that we're getting the message now. We're getting the message because the messenger is where he should be. One of the reasons why this eclipse has been so transformative is Mercury has been in Gemini. And we get it. We're seeing it. We're like, whoa, we need to do something different. This is not right. And again, Mercury is really the planet that allows us to comprehend all the details and all the stuff we talk about and see. We run our mouths and say things, and we don't even know what we're talking about. This is what I mean about how much has your paradigm of truth changed. We say things all the time, and we're disconnected from the reality of it. Seeing someone like being suffocated in front of you, if you're, that's going to change some part of your mind somehow. It's definitely made me really evaluate a lot of my relationships with the Black people I've known in my life, and just the whole thing a lot more. Because Mercury is where we adjust based on new information. This is why we don't stay stuck in the same thing we believed when we were a kid. We're always changing. So when Mercury is powerful, the person changes a lot with new information. They're not stuck. And again, with Rahu there, Rahu is very powerful in Gemini, because Rahu is where we're also trying to change things. So this is very transformative now in a positive way, for sure. Mars in Pisces also. Mars goes into Pisces in the middle of June. June 18th, I think, was the time. By the time of the 20th, Mars is there. So again, Mars in Pisces is also the spiritual warrior fighting for the truth, fighting for greater devotion. It's in Pisces. Mars in Pisces is a very good sign, again, for spirituality. And I don't just mean spiritual bypassing. I don't mean this idea that we're spiritual. I mean sadhana, spiritual practice. Not just belief that we're spiritual and we don't do anything, but doing it. That's what Mars does. Mars is the action. Okay, now I'm taking these actions. Pisces energy, based on my teachings and surrender and higher consciousness and the metaphysical side of life. So we have a lot of reason to be hopeful. But we still live in the world we live in, so don't be surprised that, oh yeah, all this stuff happens. The biggest thing I worry about are some, hurricanes or, earthquakes, and all this stuff I'm glad we haven't had big earthquake. That's one of the biggest things. I thought really we were going to get more of them, and I'm crossing my fingers that we don't, because these things are set up. But as we get closer, we might. That's the biggest fear that I have. I saw a couple questions that came up, and someone asked if Trump's going to be elected. I'm not talking about that today. I don't want to take all that on. And we have a lot that I talked about here. I just want to kind of keep it at that, not have it go on too much longer here. But the last thing that I'll just say is that we are in this eclipse cycle, and we're going to have another lunar eclipse 2 weeks later. It's going to be a wide orb, just like we just had. Again, I explained this in the last eclipse video when I did the Scorpio eclipse video. I explained these penumbral eclipses. They're wide. So we've had two penumbral lunar eclipses, and in the middle a very powerful solar eclipse. So we just had the first Scorpio lunar eclipse. We're going to have another Sagittarius lunar eclipse. They're both penumbral, but this is a long eclipse cycle. And again, they're sandwiched between this very exact solar eclipse. And again, you look at the exactitude of it as well to see how powerful it is. And so this is a really deep one, because you can see they're right on the node. You measure it by how close the sun is to the node, because the node is the ecliptic that's cutting the sun and moon in half. When it's a wider angle, it's just the penumbral eclipse, because they're wider, they're far away from the node. But here it's right on the node. The sun barely 1 degree away from the node, so it's exact. Right on the plane of the galaxy, extremely transformative. Your spiritual practices that revolve around the union of Shiva, Shakti, masculine and feminine, yin, yang, those kinds of practices and ideas for the next month or so are going to be really profound. It's one of the reasons I'm teaching a relationship course at the time. I don't just do things haphazardly. I said, I need to teach some relationship astrology now while this is happening, because it's because this is really the time to learn this energy, learn this interchange between masculine and feminine within everyone. You're a mixture of masculine and feminine energy, but you have a strong tendency towards your gender to really experience yourself through that energy much more. And then we kind of get involved with another person and sort of dance with that. This is very much that kind of energy, especially at the Mrigashira Ardra juncture. And I have to say, just on a personal note, I'm very, if it's biased or just, I love this section of the zodiac. It's literally the plane of the galaxy. And it's really where that Shiva energy really comes alive. That Shiva and Parvati energy really comes alive there. And this eclipse is definitely highlighting that interplay. So Shiva Kami says, now's the time to integrate the psyche. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am, rather. Absolutely. Integrate that flow with the confidence, power, certainty of the masculine, anchored in the receptivity, love, and devotion of the heart. This is always the dance that we're trying to work with. In a higher sense, we're beyond gender. You have the karma of your gender, because that's your karma, just like you have karma in every way. Gender is just another level of your karma, but you as a being are beyond gender, just like you're beyond karma. But you can't bypass that. Oh, I'm beyond gender, I'm beyond karma. Okay, let's see you do that. No, that's our journey. That is the spiritual journey. Darcy says, thank you, Sam. As always, put the world events in perspective with Vedic astrological teachings and give a huge dollop of hope. Well, I try. Thank you. And I appreciate that, Darcy. I appreciate you saying that. Shiva Kami says, this is where you were born and along your planets there too. Yeah, I have a lot of planets there. I have Ascendant, Mercury, and Venus in Mrigashira, and the sun in Ardra. So I feel that energy very strongly. And it's a very transformative section of the sky. And we get lost in our karmas. The biggest karma we get lost in is often our karma with other people. Whether it's a romantic relationship or just us experiencing our gender, experiencing, me, I just experience life as a man. It's so deeply part of my psyche. It's almost like, this is why gender is so important, because it's like inseparable from life through our nervous system. And there's such a strong preference. It's not even a preference. It's just like a wiring. It's chemical, it's biological, it's cultural, it's reinforced. It's such a deep identity factor. And it's just as BS as everything else on some level, but we have to navigate it. We're here like trying to navigate it all the time. We never get that far away from being a man or having the tendencies that a man would have with a wiring or as a woman like that. So it's such a big thing to explain and discuss gender and relationship and just our nature. So I'm going to be putting a lot of that into the relationships course that I'm teaching. And let me just put this. This is the link. I should have probably put it up earlier, but relationships8020.com. I think I spelled that correctly, but or I typed it correctly. But it's definitely going to be where you really understand those principles and learn how to read the charts and understand the matching of two people as well. So anyway, you all have a good rest of the day here. And thanks for your time and attention. Share this with others if you think they'll enjoy hearing this. And you take care.